All right, let's get right into it. We're about to explore one of the most, truly disturbing psychology experiments of all time. It asks a simple question. What happens when you give perfectly normal, good people absolute power? Well, the answer is, it's probably way more terrifying than you'd think.
And that quote right there, that's the heart of this whole story. I mean, get this. This isn't some made-up scenario. This is what actually went down in 1971 at Stanford, of all places. Just 6 days. That's all it took for a bunch of regular students to completely unravel into chaos and madness.
So picture this. You're a college student, it's summer, and you see an ad for a psychology study. It pays $15 a day, which back then was pretty good money. The topic, prison life. Sounds kind of interesting, maybe a little weird, but hey, easy cash, right? What's the worst that could happen? So you sign up. But what you don't know is that within just a few days, you're either going to be having a complete mental breakdown, or you'll discover a part of yourself that loves making other people suffer. This is where it all starts.
Okay, so what was the big idea here? Why even do this? Well, the guy behind it all, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, was trying to figure something out about prisons. He had this really fundamental question. Are prison guards just naturally bad people? Or does the system itself, the situation they're in, turn them into monsters? That's what he wanted to know.
So to get his answer, he put together what was supposed to be a super-controlled experiment. He sifted through a bunch of volunteers and handpicked 24 guys who were, and this is key, mentally stable, totally normal, middle-class college students. These were the good kids, you know? Then he literally just flipped a coin. Heads, you're a prisoner. Tails, you're a guard. And they built this whole fake prison right in the basement of the psychology building at Stanford. The stage was set.
Now, Zimbardo planned for this thing to run for 2 whole weeks. Yeah, he was way off. The nightmare didn't just begin, it exploded. It went from this kind of awkward role-playing game to real, genuine, terrifying abuse at a speed that honestly is just shocking. So on day 1, they made it feel real. Real cops showed up and arrested the prisoners at their actual homes, right in front of their neighbors. They brought them in, stripped them naked, deloused them, and gave them numbers instead of names. At first, everyone's kind of laughing nervously. It feels like a game. But by day 2, the prisoners had enough. They rebelled, they barricaded themselves in their cells, and that's when the guards just snapped. They grabbed fire extinguishers and started retaliating, and the punishments just got worse and worse from there.
And listen, this part is absolutely crucial. Zimbardo told the guards, look, your job is to maintain order, but you are not allowed to use physical violence. That was the rule. So all the cruel, sadistic punishments that started happening, the sleep deprivation, the humiliation, the guards just made that stuff up. It came from them.
And that escalation, that was just the warm-up act. It happened so fast. The line between what was a game and what was real didn't just get blurry. It completely disappeared. For everybody.
You had some guards who got really into it. There was one guy they nicknamed John Wayne because he started acting like this tough movie character. He seemed to genuinely enjoy his power, making up these humiliating punishments like forcing prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands. He even started volunteering for extra shifts just so he could keep it going. But you know what's almost as scary? Only about a third of the guards were like him. The others, the so-called good guards, they didn't do a thing. They just stood by and let it happen.
The effect this had on the prisoners was just devastating. This quote here is from prisoner number 8612. He didn't even last 2 days. Only 36 hours in, he just broke down completely, screaming, crying, totally overwhelmed. He was one of the first to go.
And he was far from the only one. The other prisoners started to shut down, becoming totally passive and helpless. Some guys broke out in these psychosomatic rashes all over their bodies from the stress. And here's the craziest part. They started to forget it was just an experiment. They really believed they were in prison and that they couldn't just walk out the door.
But honestly, this might be the most chilling part of the whole thing. Dr. Zimbardo, the guy running the show, he got sucked in too. He stopped being an objective scientist watching from the outside. No, he became the prison superintendent. He was walking around worrying about prison security and potential escape plots instead of the actual human beings who were literally falling apart right in front of him.
At this point, the whole experiment was like this toxic bubble. Everyone inside was so deep in their roles that nobody could see how insane it had gotten. It was going to take an outsider, someone who wasn't part of the game, to walk in and see the horror for what it really was. Day 6, just 6 days. Remember, this was supposed to go for 14 days. They didn't even make it to the halfway mark.
It took less than a week to build a fully operational, psychologically abusive prison out of nothing.
And this is the person who stopped it. A graduate student named Christina Maslach, who also happened to be Zimbardo's girlfriend, came down to see what was going on. And unlike dozens of other people who had visited and just went along with it, she was horrified. She looked at Zimbardo and said, "What you are doing to those boys is terrible." And her reaction, that real human moral outrage, was what finally snapped him out of it. It broke the spell.
So, the experiment was shut down. But what it left behind were these deeply unsettling conclusions about us, about human nature. It pointed to this dark truth about just how powerful our situation, our environment, really is. And this is really the main takeaway. The idea that maybe evil isn't something a person is. Maybe evil is something a situation creates. The experiment seemed to show that you could take good, ordinary people and put them in a toxic situation, and that situation could make them do absolutely terrible things.
So why do we still talk about this experiment all these years later? Because you can see echoes of it everywhere. I mean, think about the horrific abuses at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, or even something closer to home, like extreme bullying in schools or toxic power dynamics in a workplace. It provides this really chilling lens to understand how systems and situations can corrupt people and bring out the absolute worst in us.
But, okay, the story isn't that simple. In the years since 1971, this whole experiment has become hugely controversial. A lot of psychologists have come forward and raised some really serious questions about, was this even good science? Was it ethical? Can we even trust the conclusions?
And we're not talking about small details here. These criticisms go right to the core of the study. For instance, there's evidence now that suggests Zimbardo wasn't just watching things unfold, he was actually encouraging the guards, telling them to be tougher. Well, if that's true, then the whole conclusion is wrong, right? It's not the situation creating the evil, it's the guy in the lab coat. Plus, can you really say something about all of humanity based on just 24 college guys? And maybe the biggest issue, if we just blame the bad situation, does that give people a free pass to be cruel? It really complicates the legacy of the whole thing.
So, yeah, the experiment is flawed. But even with all the controversy, it leaves us with this one deeply uncomfortable question. And you have to be honest with yourself. If it were you, if you were handed a uniform, a pair of sunglasses, and a nightstick, and given total power over other people, who would you become? Would you be the one dishing out the punishment? The one breaking down? Or maybe worst of all, the one who just stands by and watches it happen? That's the question it forces us to ask ourselves.